it out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Welcome to the 596th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey. And Nancy Wolf is not going to be in today, so I'm doing the show alone. Just to remind everybody who, actually to inform those who have never been here before, because people who have been here a lot know this by heart, I'm sure. The articles that I'm going to be talking about are from my blog, geoharvey.com, and they will be available from a link that is listed on the information about the show. You can go to the link, in which case you'll have 21 articles, or you can go to geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com, and click on the calendar to find the date. The articles that I'm talking about today start on the 17th of October, which was a Thursday. It was a week ago today. Today being the 24th. And I'm just going to kick this off. The first article is from Clean Technica, and it is about, the picture is a picture of the Volkswagen ID Buzz. Volkswagen ID Buzz gets a boost from Electrify America. If you've been waiting for years for the futuristic electric throwback to the iconic Volkswagen bus, the ID Buzz, you will be heartened to know, it's almost here. Volkswagen says it is to arrive in late fall of 2024, and Electrify America says it will boost the experience of ownership for 3 years. Now, the boost here from Electrify America is that owners get a 25% reduction in price for 3 years. And they're going to be started off with a free 500 kilowatt hour just to get them going. At least that's what I understand. So you can get a Volkswagen ID Buzz and have it. I don't know, 500 kilowatt hours may sound like a lot, but it's about $35 or $40 of electricity wholesale. It might be $100 retail, depends upon where you are. But anyway, there is a picture of the Volkswagen ID Buzz, and that's what it's all about. Our next article is from CNN. Let me put this up for you. Global water cycle off balance for, quote, the first time in human history, end quote, threatening half the world's food production. That's the title. The picture is a picture of a drought that was going on in Sri Lanka. The global water cycle has been thrown off balance by human action, quote, for the first time in human history, end quote, fueling a growing water disaster that will wreak havoc on economies, food production, and lives, a landmark report says. Now, what this is referring to is something different from what's going on in the ocean. This is referring to or lakes or rivers. This is referring to groundwater. And what happens, and I should say rivers and lakes, because that's separate from ocean. When I said include lakes and rivers before, I was misspeaking. Basically, what's happening is the water that we have been putting into the ground, that naturally goes into the ground, has been reduced in many places. In a lot of places, the aquifers have been dropping because water has been pumped out. It is that groundwater is what feeds plants, but it evaporates. And what's been happening is it's been evaporating differently than it ever did before. And it's got to a point now where we may have gone into a tipping point. Apparently, we have gone into a tipping point. And the water that evaporates into the atmosphere, which would normally form itself into clouds and so forth and come down very predictably in other places, is not there. It's not available to fall. And so that means that rainfall in other areas is no longer being put into the ground the way that it had in the past. And according to this report, which was reported in CNN, and I don't have the name of the organization that reported this in front of me, I'm sorry to say. But if you go to the CNN link, it will be there. The result is that areas are being desiccated. The rain isn't falling, the snow isn't falling, and so forth. And we've seen this over and over again in the not very distant past, with rivers and so forth just not having the rain they should have. So this is a serious problem. And I will get to the other problems with water in this edition of Energy Week, but I'm going to go on to the next item. We have a picture of an oil rig in the Caspian Sea. You don't normally, at least I don't normally think of oil rigs in the Caspian Sea. I think of oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, in the North Sea, in other places. This oil rig is in the Caspian, and the image comes from BP. The article is from Clean Technica. The title is BP Backs Away from Climate Goals in Quest to Maximize Profits. BP announced plans to abandon its curbs on fossil fuel production to target several new investments in the Middle East and the Gulf of Mexico. According to Reuters, BP is currently in talks to invest in 3 new projects in Iraq, including one in the Majnoon field. That is an oil field in Iraq. BP is selling off its renewable energy subsidiaries, and it's going apparently into, it's just going for profits. And this is something that I regard as dangerous for obvious reasons, I think. What good is profits when you don't have a society to live in? It's a really big question. Okay, our next item is from Red, Green, and Blue. What's pictured here is a new kind of nuclear power plant, a schematic. It's the Kairos power system, which is from Kairos Energy. This article is titled, AI is sucking up so much electricity we're looking to restart nuclear reactors. What could go wrong? Google recently announced that it had signed a deal to purchase energy from yet-to-be-built small nuclear plants to power artificial intelligence. Climate and energy expert Reinhard Uhrig decried the New Deal. Now, question, why did he decry the New Deal? Well, I think you could say that he decries this deal because almost everything is wrong with it. part of the problem here is that Google is, it does remind me of other investments. The investing world is getting very confused, I think. In renewable energy, there's a lot of billions of dollars worth of investments going into support for hydrogen plants, but in corporate America, Google, Amazon, and other organizations are putting money into nuclear. And I saw an article today, in fact, that said that NextEra Energy is considering putting money into restarting a nuclear plant. Again, it's because of increased demand, partly because of renewable energy and partly because of Bitcoin, partly for other systems, including data centers and things of that nature. But in this particular case, what we're seeing is Google is putting money into purchasing electricity from nuclear reactors that have never been approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. This sounds like they're just walking out on a bridge to possibly a bridge to nowhere. And they are not paying attention to how much time is involved, if you look at some of these nuclear plants, a lot of the plants that have been built so far have failed to be developed over a period of 15 years. Some of them have been opened after as much as 40 years after they were started, with fits and starts in the business of building them. But in this particular case, in the case of this, let me do that. In the case of this reactor, that reactor has never been built. It's never been approved for construction. We don't have a site for it. We don't have local people saying, I don't want a nuclear reactor in my backyard. And the problems that they can have with that kind of development are extremely long. It surprises me that companies like Google and Amazon would be involved in things of that type. But apparently they've got money to put into these nuclear reactors. And on top of everything else, aside from the fact that they don't know that the reactors are actually going to be approved and built, they could power their work with renewable energy. And this has been abundantly clear. So I'm surprised at the whole thing. I'm going to go on. I could go on and on about that, but I don't want to. Okay, we have a picture of coastal Alaska. Let me get that up. This is from ABC News. ABC is American Broadcast Company or Corporation. The title of the article is Nearly $75 million in federal grants to help Alaska Native communities with climate impacts. Nearly $75 million will be aimed at helping Alaska Native communities as they deal with the impacts of climate change. The grant is going to Tribal Health Consortium for resilience to extreme weather and changes to environment in coastal communities. I want to point out here that the U.S. government has already put many millions of dollars into relocating a village. And I forget how many dollars per person it was to relocate that village. But the impression that I have is that if you said, okay, we're going to ask you to walk away from the village, we're putting this amount of money into an account for you, it would probably pay for them for the rest of their lives. We can't do that with every coastal community in the United States. I want to point out here that Donald Trump has said that the amount of seawater rise in the United States, in the ocean, is something like 1/8 of an inch in 500 years, or something like that, 450 years. He should take a look at Cameron, Louisiana. In Louisiana, county-sized areas are called parishes, and Cameron is the parish seat of Cameron County. Cameron County is the Cameron Parish is the county-sized area in that had the highest percentage of pro-Trump votes in 2020. Over 90% of the people there in 2020 voted for Donald Trump. Almost 90% voted for Donald Trump in 2016. But Cameron, Louisiana had a population of something over 3,200 people in, I think it was 1970. By 2022, that population had dropped to 191 people. And that's the most recent figure that I've seen. But Cameron used to be 5 feet above sea level. It had that amount the amount that it's been above sea level has been reduced to 3 feet due to land subsiding and ocean level rise, about the same amount of each. So basically, the land has subsided because the oil is being pumped out from under that region. But the sea level rise in that part of the United States is about 1 foot. Some communities in Louisiana have already been moved. At least one, I should say, has already been moved. Cameron the people in Cameron are going to have to move. The people along the coast in Louisiana, the people who are close to the coast, have all been told they're going to have to move. The people around New Orleans have been told, if you're within the levees, it's okay, but if you're outside the levees, you're going to have to move. And we should just recognize that. There's $75 million for helping Native communities in Alaska. Nowhere near enough. It's just a drop in the bucket. Okay, the next item I've got is a floating PTX project. Let me get this up. This looks like a ship. I haven't read enough about it to know that it's a ship or not. I believe it is not a ship. It's actually more like a barge that can operate in the way that they want. The article is from Renews. The title is Ohmium Joins 300 Megawatt Floating PTX Project. PTX is power to whatever. Whatever is usually hydrogen, ammonia, something like that. Ohmium International has signed a term sheet with Switch 2 to develop electrolyzers for a 300 megawatt floating offshore hydrogen and ammonia synthesis project. Switch 2's Power to X project will create an industrial scale floating green hydrogen and ammonia production facility. I'm going to tell you that this is another thing that I'm not really happy about, because I think we've got better ways to do things. Nevertheless, ammonia does have many, many uses, and it is made with hydrogen, 95+% of which comes from methane. So the problems with methane are just horrible. So I should get on, because I'm getting behind schedule. We're up to Saturday, October 19th. The last 3 articles that I talked about were from Friday. Okay, we have a picture here of a Fécamp wind farm. This is an article from Renews. The title is France unveils 9.2 gigawatt offshore tender. France unveiled plans to tender 9,200 megawatts of fixed bottom and floating offshore wind power. Energy Minister Olga Givernet said a process launching at the beginning of 2025 will aim for 4 gigawatts of fixed capacity in the North Sea coast and 5.2 gigawatts of floating turbines in the Atlantic and Mediterranean. The difference between fixed capacity and floating capacity is that floating capacity is put out where the sea is too deep to provide a good environment for wind turbines that are fixed on the ocean floor. So they have to float. And this particular item is important because France is heavily into nuclear power, and it needs other things besides nuclear power. So the next item is from Renews, and let me, there we go, yeah. This is a solar plant. The image is from a company called Greening, and the caption is Greening wins 60 megawatt US solar gig. 60 megawatt farm is pretty big. Greening has been awarded the EPC contract to construct a 60 megawatt PV power generation plant that will supply renewable energy to a major technology company at one of its facilities in the state of Indiana. EPC, by the way, is engineering, procurement, and construction. The Jasper County Solar Project will cover an area of 452 acres. Now, 452 acres is big. It doesn't cover a square mile, but it's 2/3 of a square mile, almost 2/3 of a square mile. This is a big plant, and it's going into Indiana. Okay. The next item is a picture of the Cool Glass Wind Farm Limited. This is from breakingnews.ie. The .ie is for Ireland. The title is Renewables Firm Asks Court to Declare State Has Failed to Approve Enough Green Energy Projects. The state here is Ireland. Okay? A renewables firm, Cool Glass Wind Farm Limited, is asking the High Court of Ireland, to declare that Ireland's Central Planning Authority has failed to approve enough green energy infrastructure projects to meet the 2030 environmental targets. So basically, Cool Glass is saying we're not going to be able to meet the targets of the country unless the people who are involved in approving things for the country do their work and approve them. So there it is. Okay, we are up to Sunday, October 20th, and we have an item from oilprice.com. Oil Price, by the way, is sometimes thought of as an organization that is pro-fossil fuels, and it does have pro-fossil fuels articles. It also has pro-renewable articles. It is kind of a mix. This is an Alberta wind farm. If you look carefully at the horizon on the left side here, behind that nearest turbine, you can see that in the distance are some pretty tall mountains. And I would judge by the color of blue that's there that they might be, I don't know, at least 6 or 8 miles away, maybe more. The title is Alberta Under Fire from Environmentalists for Restrictions on Renewable Energy. The Alberta government is wary of major new wind and solar energy developments due to their potential impact on the environment. They'll tell people to drill, but they don't want wind power or solar power. Critics say the government is restricting green energy growth to focus on continued production of oil and gas. This is a dangerous dangerous approach. The dangers are not just from pollution, from global warming, things like that. One of the dangers here is that the sale of oil and gas might be cut off very rapidly. And if they haven't got anything else to fall back on, they might be in a serious pickle. I saw an article on this same thing today. And that article said that they are not getting investment in renewable energy because they put a moratorium on it. And they had that moratorium in place long enough that a bunch of projects could not be developed. And when the moratorium ended, the projects that they had were no longer in place and just kind of dried up and disappeared. And they don't have new investors in renewable energy in that province. Okay. The next article is from Clean Technica. Let me get that up. These are Tesla chargers in Japan. The title is Tesla Reaches 60,000 Superchargers. This is a worldwide this article is about their superchargers worldwide. Tesla gave us a notable update that it has installed its 60,000th supercharger globally. Japan is really not a major market for Tesla, but it brought in the special occasion with its 600th supercharger stall, which I believe is what you're actually looking at. Oh, it is. The 60,000th, now these are the 600th, this is the 600th installation in Japan, but it is the 60,000th installation of a supercharger in the world. The 60,000th supercharger stall is also the location of Tesla's first V4 supercharger in Japan. So this is an item that could be talked about for a number of different reasons. But of course, the thing that is most important is that it is the 60,000th superchargers install in the world. Okay. We have another item, let me get it up. This is a picture of a Volkswagen ID Buzz. I'm sorry, ID4. This is the Volkswagen ID4, and this is from Clean Technica. Clean Technica focuses a lot on automobiles and other vehicles. And to the point where if there's a fire engine that's powered by electricity, or if there's a bicycle powered by electricity, even a skateboard powered by electricity, it's probably going to have an article in Clean Technica. It bothers me a little bit because there's a lot else going on, but nevertheless, this is where it is. The title is Desperate Trouble in the U.S. may force Volkswagen to rethink the Scout brand. Volkswagen planned to produce 100,000 ID4 SUVs annually in the United States. But in the first 3 quarters of this year, it sold only 16,400 of the cars. Now that's 16,000 out of 750,000 that it probably expected. To make matters worse, there have been repeated recalls due to technical defects. And from there, it just gets worse. Now, I should talk about what worse means. There have been repeated recalls due to technical defects. Recently, authorities in the United States warned that the doors of the ID4 could open while driving. These are doors that open with a hinge. They have the hinge forward. In the old days, particularly cars from Britain, had doors that opened with a hinge at the back. And having one of those open while you're driving down the highway could be a serious problem. The doors that open with a hinge forward can be a serious problem. If a person opens the door, holds on to the handle to be steady and opens the door by accident, that person could conceivably fall out of the car. That is a defect that affects all of the nearly 100,000 ID4s sold in the United States. This is sold in the United States because the ID4 was sold in the United States before the beginning of this year. Volkswagen has built a factory to build them in the United States, but after that, they didn't get the sales they wanted. Volkswagen is currently not allowed to sell the ID4 in the United States until that issue is settled. So maybe that's a big reason why they've only sold 16,400 cars. I don't know how long this has been going on, but they have been having trouble. And that's not good. Okay, we're up to Monday, October 21st. We have a picture of a wind farm, which I'll put up. This is an article from Renew Economy. And it's really, I find it extremely interesting. The title is Baseload Coal and Peaking Gas Paradigm, quote, no longer fit, end quote, for the modern grid, says AEMO chief. Now, the AEMO is Australia Energy Market Operator. And the AEMO chief, Daniel Westerman, said the traditional blend of baseload power and peaking generation is no longer fit for the modern Australian grid, as cheap renewables backed by storage take over the markets. Now, the title says baseload coal and peaking gas. In fact, the traditional paradigm is often baseload coal and often peaking gas, but it has been baseload in the United States, coal, gas, nuclear, and peaking could be gas, or it could be oil, or it could be other things. But the problem is that is a paradigm. And that's the paradigm that was developed 100 years ago. We have a new paradigm. We don't need baseload power anymore. We don't need peaking gas plants to support the power that we've got from renewables. Now, renewables are generally solar and wind, but they don't have to be exclusively solar and wind. They can be solar, they can be wind, they can be geothermal, they can be hydropower. Hydropower is often run as a baseload type of system, but it can ramp up and down much faster than baseload coal or gas plants or nuclear plants can. In addition, there are other types of renewable energy, geothermal, which also is similar. You can run it as though it's baseload power, but you don't have to. But in addition to that, we've got a whole bunch of different kinds of storage, some of which are battery storage. And the battery storage has two advantages, one of which is it can ramp up or down basically instantly. In the past with baseload power, it was never possible to ramp up or down instantly. But in addition to being able to ramp up or down instantly, it is very, very cheap. In the old days with baseload power, peaking plants and load following plants produced expensive electricity. But the electricity in batteries is very, very cheap. And we're expecting that by the end of this decade, that electricity will be put on the grid for about ½ cent per kilowatt hour, in addition to the cost of the material of the electricity from the plants producing renewable power. In the case of wind, that is going to be less than 3½ cents per kilowatt hour. In the case of solar, it's going to be a little bit lower than that, although I saw solar bidding coming in almost at 1½ cents per kilowatt hour in Saudi Arabia. I don't remember. It might be that it'll be in this show. I don't remember. It is something that I would talk about. The cost of renewable energy is getting very low, and the renewables backed by batteries are not only very cheap, but they're high quality electricity compared to what we used to get from coal, gas, or nuclear plants. Okay, our next item, let me put this up, is this is an electric school bus, and the article is from Clean Technica. The title is, "This is how electric vehicles win, one school bus at a time." Typically, electric school buses are outfitted with smaller, less costly battery packs, and that are good for fast charging because their routes are relatively short and they can recharge during the day. That is exactly the opposite pattern that energy planners aim with V2G technology. Now, V2G is vehicle to grid. So what's happening here is we have a vehicle, the vehicle gets charged by the grid, and then if it's plugged in and the grid needs electricity, the vehicle can be backup power for the grid. Now, the problem with buses is that they are charged during the day, typically by solar power, and they can discharge at night. One problem is short-term demand spikes are during the day, and the charging, it happens at that time. The demand, however, is very often in the evening after the sun goes down. We'll say in the winter, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, the sun goes down, and there is sudden demand because people are fixing their dinner, people are watching television, people are going home, and these buses get plugged in at that time in order to get charged. But they're going to be sitting there all night. If they have anything in them, they can discharge it to the grid. So that's basically where we are with that. Okay, we have another item coming up from Renews. This is an offshore wind farm. The title of the article is RWE, National Grid file for 2.8 gigawatt NY bid. Maybe that needs some translation. RWE and the National Grid together are filing for a 2.8 gigawatt New York bid. A joint venture of RWE and National Grid Ventures, Community Offshore Wind, that's the name of the joint venture, submitted a full proposal to provide up to 2,800 megawatts of offshore wind for the state of New York. If the proposal is selected, the project would be built in 2 phases in the developer's federal offshore wind lease area in New York Bight. Now, just so people who don't know, New York Bight is spelled B-I-G-H-T. It's not a bite of, in a computer, it's not a bite of your sandwich. This is Bight, B-I-G-H-T. The New York Bight starts basically at the eastern tip of Long Island, and it runs in the area of sea down to the southernmost tip of New Jersey. That is an area which is almost a bay, but it's very big, and it really isn't a bay. It's just open to the sea over a quarter of its of the area. So it's a little bit more calm, but not to the point of being a harbor. I lived at one time near a harbor and off a harbor. I was on a peninsula into the harbor that was completely surrounded by a tidal river, with the exception of a very narrow area that did occasionally flood during high tide in storms. And I saw a seawall pulled apart by waves near where I lived. Actually, it was where I worked. And I was amazed. But nevertheless, this bight does have calmer waters, but it'll have a lot of wind. So wind power is kind of available. We're up to Tuesday, October 22nd. And there is a picture of wind turbines. This article is from a publication called Down to Earth. The title is BRICS Nations Hit Clean Energy Milestone, Fossil Fuels to Drop Under 50% by the end of 2024 for the first time. Now, the BRICS nations are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And the initials of those countries put together is BRICS, which is called BRICS. The BRICS nations are poised to see fossil fuel capacity drop below half of their installed capacity by the end of 2024 in a major shift toward cleaner energy, according to a new report by Global Energy Monitor. Now, I notice that Russia is one of these countries and China is another. And South Africa is another. Each of these countries has got its own agenda when it comes to climate change and renewable energy and fossil fuels. Brazil is one of the countries that has the highest density of the highest percentage of its energy coming from renewables. Russia has a really big interest in making sure that it keeps selling fossil fuels, which I believe is the reason why it made war in Ukraine. I think Vladimir Putin was tired of hearing that the nations in Europe were going to be switching to all renewable energy for generating electricity by 2030, and he wanted to slow that process down. I think, you know, there are people in this world who are sociopaths, psychopaths, and I kind of suspect that he might be one of them, a person who has no conscience about starting a war. India is switching as fast as it can, but I believe it is still building coal-burning power plants, the same position that China is in, except that China is way out ahead of everybody else. And South America, they've been spending years trying to figure out what they want to do about climate change and nuclear power and things of that nature. So this is an interesting article. The idea that they would be intently, that they would be 50% renewable for their electricity is interesting. Okay, we have an item from Clean Technica. 1.3 million US-made solar panels, 875 megawatts, Orion Solar Farm goes live in Texas. Now, that solar farm that you see may be the Orion Solar Farm. I believe it is. The SB Energy Global has announced that its Orion 1, Orion 2, and Orion 3 solar projects are ready to operate. According to Renewables Now, the 3 new solar farms combined have 1.3 million solar panels manufactured in the United States by First Solar. Now, First Solar has been around for a while, but there has been a lot of money that's gone into manufacturing in the United States under Joe Biden. And that money built factories which are now producing. That's going to make a difference. And this, it's interesting, to, among other things, that this particular solar farm went online in Texas, where renewable energy was shunned for a long time. Now that the nuclear power, solar power, coal and gas power, but especially nuclear and gas, have been shown to be somewhat unreliable in climate emergencies, in weather emergencies, they have been putting in more renewable energy. And that has made a difference in Texas. So, going on to the next item, this also from Clean Energy, from Clean Technica rather. D3 Energy floating solar panels after Hurricane Milton. Those panels that you see that picture is after that area was hit by Hurricane Milton. Those panels are where they're supposed to be. Buoyant design and adaptable mooring mechanisms help floating solar stay intact through Hurricane Milton. That's the title. Super Typhoon Capricorn struck China as one of the most worst typhoons in the region since 1994. But the floating Mibet solar panels were buoyant and sturdy. In the United States, the story in Hurricane Milton was much the same. These solar panels are, they don't get as blown around as you might think. And I'm thinking back to Hurricane Sandy hitting New Jersey. And shortly after that, I took a look at solar panels that were left in the wake of that, mostly rooftop solar panels. And I noticed that there were a few panels that had broken loose here and there, but very few. One of the things that's interesting about solar panels in a hurricane is that if a hurricane comes along and it breaks apart 2% of the solar panels, the rest of the solar panels in an array will continue producing electricity as soon as they have light. And if the broken solar panels are cut out of the array, that array will just continue producing electricity. And as a result of that, some places that had microgrids or mini grids that could depend upon those were able to continue having electricity during that period after Hurricane Sandy. Okay, we're up to Wednesday, October 23rd. We have people celebrating the AA PowerLink progress. That is to say, the progress of the AA PowerLink. This article comes from Renewable Energy Magazine. The title is, Sun Cable Gets Conditional Approval for the World's Largest Renewable Energy Infrastructure Project. Okay, Sun Cable has been granted conditional approval by Singapore's Energy Market Authority to import energy via the Australia-Asia PowerLink. The AA PowerLink is set to be the world's largest solar farm and battery project. And that PowerLink has a submarine power system that connects to the grid through Indonesian water. It starts at the western end, shouldn't say end, the western coast of the Northern Territories, and it goes through Indonesian water to Singapore, and it is 4,300 kilometers long. That's a long ways. It's not 3,000 miles, but it's close. It has will supply 1.75 gigawatts of electricity after 2035. This is a huge project. It's eventually going to be, I think, at least 6 gigawatts. 2 gigawatts of that will go to to cover demand in Australia, but 4 gigawatts eventually will be exported to Indonesia, and it's not going to provide, to Singapore. It's not going to provide 100% of the electricity of Singapore, but it is going to provide a substantial amount. Singapore is setting up to import electricity from other sources. And so they are looking at other places to supply them with electricity, most of which, as I understand it, are in Malaya, which is hardly surprising. I imagine they could be importing electricity from Indonesia as well. Okay, we are up to our last story. Our last story? No, our next to last story. This is from MSN. We have a picture of the Atlantic Ocean. And the title of this story is The Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is on the verge of collapsing, climate scientists warn. It might have seemed like science fiction 20 years ago, but the plot of the 2004 film The Day After Tomorrow may be turning real. Some 44 of the world's leading climate scientists warned that the Gulf Stream and other Atlantic Ocean currents are on the brink of failure. We've been seeing indications that this was coming for years. And in the last couple of years, it has been reported as a slowdown of the Gulf Stream. I don't know what this means in the sense of it sounds dire, and maybe it is, but maybe it's less dire than it appears. The Gulf Stream is what conducts ocean heat to the north of Europe. The countries that are on the south of it, which include the UK, Ireland, Norway, and so forth, all receive heat from the Gulf Stream, because anything that is from the north, any wind that comes from the north, is heated up by the Gulf Stream. But the idea that the Gulf Stream would collapse, I'm not sure how that happens. I've been seeing that the Gulf is much warmer than it used to be. And I have also been seeing that the area east of the Gulf is much warmer, all the way to Africa, much warmer than it used to be. And from Africa, going north all the way to Ireland and beyond, it is much warmer than it used to be. And I don't know that the Gulf Stream is collapsing so much as it is rerouting. So I don't want to get into a panic over this. If it happens, it happens. I will tell you when I'm panicking. The last story is from Clean Technica. Sorry about that. The chart shows a decline in our use of coal and a growth in our use of wind power. This is from Clean Technica. The title is $430 million for U.S. clean energy manufacturing in coal communities. Coal power declined in the United States through the Trump presidency. Don't fool yourself. The Dow Jones Coal Index, DJUSCL, I think it is, disappeared in October of 2020 while Trump was still president and we didn't know who was going to be elected. The coal miners had lost 30% of their jobs while Donald Trump was in office. Coal power declined in the U.S. through the Trump presidency, and it has declined since. Coal power just isn't competitive. So people living in coal communities need jobs in new fields. The Biden-Harris administration has dished out $430 million to give them jobs in new fields. So that is, and there are, I mean, if you think about it, West Virginia, one of the biggest coal producers in the United States, is in Central Appalachians. 500 mountains in the Central Appalachians have had their tops removed to get coal that was under the top. So there are these mountains that look like buttes all through the Central Appalachians. People need jobs, and the jobs have been fleeing from that area. So what happens? Doesn't really matter that these people voted for Donald Trump. Joe Biden and his administration is putting money into finding them jobs, which is basically what is needed. Now, for those, that was the last story. I'm putting up a piece for you that says, have a significantly grand week. And I will ask you, is there such a thing as an insignificantly grand week? I don't know. Anyway, hope you come back next time, and I will hold my breath, well, figuratively, until then. Have a good week. See you later.